So South Bend to LA, you obviously had a perception of this job. You had a perception of the program from afar. You know the region, but like you were working from afar, and now you've come out here. It's been like 5 minutes so far, but really early impressions of the job.
It's to me the greatest job in America to have, being the GM here at USC. You know, it's the greatest city, in my opinion, in America, and it's a city of opportunity. And I think that's a big reason why I chose this job. You know, obviously with where this thing's going in college athletics, you know, USC offers so much for young people, but the city does too. There's not one thing that USC can't offer young people, and big reason why I chose the job.
So I think the role of GM in college football is still new. So what you find is, all right, not everyone had one. Well, now most people have one, but the roles and duties program to program may vary drastically.
Very different.
So you walk in here, I think maybe like the best way to ask the question is explain to someone who only knows what the two letters stand for, what the role of GM at USC actually entails.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different aspects that, you know, it goes into it. Obviously, you know, recruiting and NIL and evaluations and other stuff like that. But it's not like I'm not, you know, helping this program in other areas. I value everything, and, you know, really look at everything that we're doing as far as our entire football program, whether it's strength and nutrition, you know, our guys sleeping. I know I've said this numerous times, you know, I got Charmin Ultra Soft toilet paper in the bathroom.
Finally.
Yeah, finally. We need it. We need it. But every aspect of this program needs to be under evaluation, including myself. And, you know, that's how I view this role. It's not just recruiting and NIL. I know it's like that in most places, you know, but here it's a little bit different, where I'm really taking a dive into every aspect of the program.
When you're looking at constructing rosters, obviously it's a lot more nuanced than just saying, well, let's put a team on the field. Well, there's a lot of methodology behind how you stack depth, how you stack classes. Explain to folks like how detailed you have to get above and beyond just throwing a magnet up on a grease board of like the psychology of putting together an actual football team to go win for multiple years instead of trying to pop one 11-win season.
Yeah, you have to be able to create layers within a football team. You have to be able to create a roster, you know, in which, you know, every player matters, right? And when you create, you know, a roster and you're helping build a roster, you need to look at every single position, because you really need to have the type of depth, especially when you're asking these kids to play 16 games. If you're going to go to a national championship, the type of depth that you have to have is different, right? It's not what it used to be. It's not where you're playing 13 games. Like, you add 3 more games to a schedule, that's a lot, you know. And for us, obviously playing, you know, potentially in a conference championship too, it could be 17 games. So that's a lot of football games. You have to create layers within your roster. You know, what we do from an evaluation standpoint, financially, how we look at things positionally, how we create financial models, and looking at, you know, not only this year, but the next 3 or 4 years. You have to be able to forward think, and creating a roster. You can't just say, well, this is just it. No, you got to look 3 to 4 years in advance if you want to have the type of success that's sustained. And that's what we're currently doing now, is looking at every single, you know, position, trying to create depth, creating it the right way, building it through culture, taking a lot of high school kids. I've been adamant we're going to take more high school kids than anybody in the country this year, and it's going to help us build our culture. You know, and when it comes to the portal, we're going to take the right kids that make sense for this place, but also are the right guys for the future as well.
Last year, I remember vividly in the summer talking about Notre Dame.
Yep.
You guys were going to open with A&M. And the perception was offensive line's going to be the weak link of this team. A&M's got a pretty fierce pass rush, plus it's Kyle Field on the road. So they'll lose week 1, and that'll ultimately be what puts a ceiling on them. Well, then you guys go in there and you win week 1. And you have injuries along the offensive line during the year, and you still make it all the way to a national championship game. And it almost got to the point where it felt like no matter who they put in there, they're just going to play winning football. It feels like they've got unlimited amounts of guys who can play winning football.
That's right.
Obviously, it's not unlimited, but you obviously had guys in there that maybe weren't all former 5-star guys, but they were like culture program guys. So then I think about that. Like, if I'm wearing a GM's hat, I could go out and try and target every 4 and 5 star graded kid, whatever grade system you use, but I could go out and try and target every highly graded kid imaginable, or I could be selective with that, but also know there's a solid layer I want in this place of guys that may not have every offer in the world.
That's
but
right.
The trade-off is I'm going to bring him in here and he's going to be grateful for it and he'll work his tail off and he'll put his face in the fan anytime I need him to. And he's going to be here 4 years
That's
from now.
right.
To where when I have to backfill because some guy goes down second quarter against UCLA, he's not on anyone's radar and he'll just play and people will say, wow, where'd he come from? Like, how aware of that do you have to be?
You have to be incredibly aware of it because everybody's past different, right? Every kid wants to be the starter, wants to be the All-American, wants to be the first-round pick, but everybody's past different. And it doesn't mean you can't achieve all your goals and dreams by year 4 or 5 in college. So you have to recruit that way too, though. You have to be able to sit there and say, hey, man, you have to value the place, right? You have to put all your value into what USC can do for you and how we're going to develop you. And I think that's what we're doing right now here in this program that's really going to enhance what we're doing is we're trying to find the right kids that value this place, that want to be here. And it's not just about early playing time. It's about kids that value the degree, value this city, value the relationships that they're going to have with the coaching staff and want to be here. They want to go to class. They want every aspect of coming to USC. Those are the kids that we're going to bring in. And by doing that, we're going to create this culture of guys that are fired up and, you don't know when it's going to happen, when your turn's going to come, but they were dying to play here at USC. And, in doing that, I think that's how we're going to, get to the mountaintop.
I remember I was talking about Georgia Tech one time, but I remember because I grew up in Georgia. And, the working theory down there has always been, well, they can never really compete for a national title because the academic requirements are so stringent. And I thought to myself, yes, they are.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get in there and it's hard to major in engineering and also be a really good wideout. But you don't have to have 1,000 guys capable of doing it.
Right.
You've got to find 25 per cycle that are capable and then willing to buy in. How similar is that mentality to what you're talking about? When you're talking about people buying into program, You're not talking about writing the biggest check. You're talking about using resources, but also getting guys from the neck up that are thinking similarly to you. And even if 4 out of 5 on an official visit weekend don't think that way, if you stack enough of that one guy who do, then we're set moving forward.
That's right. That's exactly how we're thinking. We want to take the right kids. That value this place and value culture and are willing to stay here. It doesn't matter if it's year 2, year 3 when it's their turn, but they want to be here. I think another big thing, that we're really looking at is these are guys from the state of California.
Right.
And it just means so much more to them. Like when those kids come out the tunnel and, we've had practice and we've had recruits there. When they come out the tunnel, and I've stopped them and said, man, can you imagine when we have a playoff game here in the Collie and that torch is lit and there's a light show going on? Can you imagine that moment when your fans, your family's in the stands and they've been coming to the games with you since you were 9 years old? Can you imagine that moment and what it's going to be like? Because I know what it's going to look like. And I cannot wait for that moment. And when you have those types of kids that see that too, that's what we're looking for. Not only are these kids that value the place and understand, what it all means to get an Ivy League type degree here at USC, but it's also the element of, man, this just means the world to me to be here in this moment, to lead this place back to the promised land and to have that playoff game in the Coliseum.
We have watched, the last decade and a half. I've watched Ohio State, I've watched Bama, I've watched Georgia, I've watched them dominate with a roster somewhat full of guys that are homegrown in their own states. And then I've watched them raid South Florida and I've watched them raid Southern California. And I know because I've talked to some of those kids, I went here because home wasn't really a viable option if I wanted to compete for a title. How much of that feedback do you get from guys of, hey, all things equal, I want to be at Southern Cal. I just got to know that I can compete for the highest level that the sport has to offer here. Yeah,
it's something that, right now, just coming in the last, as you said, 5 minutes, it's been the, it's been the biggest goal of mine is to reestablish the relationships and culture around the best in California playing for USC. I'm a big believer in research. I know the last 5 years, there's been 105 guys that have been drafted, from the state of California, and only 10 played at USC. That won't happen. 5 years from now, that number is going to look a lot different because there's going to be a lot of kids that went to USC. And that's been my number one goal is getting into this state and putting a fence around it and saying, if you are the best from California, you're going to stay home, you're going to play here, and you're going to help bring USC back to the national championship.
You and I are talking, it's mid-April right now.
Yep.
People may watch this in August, they may watch it next week, whatever. But as we sit here right now, you guys have really loaded up the coming recruiting class.
Yeah.
And I know, not talking about specific players, but in general, there's a lot of methodology, like there's a lot of purpose behind doing it that way. So anytime you talk about it, any rival fan just says, oh, it'll all fall apart, and then, come what may. What is the thinking behind doing it the way that you guys have been doing it since you walked in?
It's similar to what I've done the last 4 years of my career. I've had a number one recruiting class in the country at this time over the last 4 years. If you look at what's been done, there's a method behind it, and it's building a culture and it's building family before they even set foot on campus. And the more you get them committed early, and these parents are establishing relationships together, and these kids are establishing relationships together, all of a sudden they get to June. Official visits isn't the first time they've seen each other, know each other, have talked to each other. It's a family, and that's the big goal behind having these guys, committed early, and they know that. There's also other things that we're going to do in June that other teams aren't doing, with our guys, that is going to help enhance them. So when they set foot on campus, they're ready to rock and roll. And, that's a big reason why we're making such a push for it now. On top of the fact that we're going to take more high school kids than anybody in the country, I don't care where the ranking finishes. If we finish 15th, that's fine, but we're going to have the right kids. And I know right now we have the number one recruiting class in the country for most people. I could care less. What I care about is taking the right kids that value this place, that want to play together, and the families that want to be tailgating together before games. And that moment we're in the Coliseum, it's a playoff, we're all hugging each other, and it's that moment. And I want it to be that feeling, and I want it to start now in recruiting. And that's why you see that method I think is, served a lot of success in my career the last 4 years.
Chad, we appreciate it, brother.
Thanks for having me.